More than one, you're welcome to do more than one. Yes, okay. It's a two-part game, so I'll give you the instructions for the first part. Who remembers how to make a paper jet? You can see this is my best effort without someone to help me. That is your goal. Make your paper jet. If you don't have a piece of paper, put your hand up. Antoinette and the ladies promise they'll get you one. So we're making paper. Oh, come on, Andrea. I need everyone to help me here. That's not fair. Okay, we got paper jets. If you've made one and you can make another one, please do. Terry, you got a paper jet? We need paper jets in the room. Wonderful. Fabulous. A little bit more time. It's even okay if they don't fly, because you know I'm going to have the shameful moment of throwing mine first. The goal of this part of the game is to keep throwing the paper jets in the air. The goal is start sharing the paper jets, okay? You've got about 30 seconds. Let's see how much we can get in the room. Ready? Go. Oh boy. Come on, we need some coming back. Keep them in the air. Keep them in the air. Oh, that one comes back. Fabulous. Wow. Oh, I'll get another one. Woo, what a deal. Oh, wonderful. Keep them in the air. These paper jets want to stay. Keep them going. Got 20 seconds. Let's keep them in the air. Determined to get one to you, aren't they? Woo! There's a really good one there. Fantastic. Okay, give yourselves a hand. We got some paper planes. Okay, hang on to the paper planes. If you haven't got one, please get one, because we're going to do the second part now. Oh, am I not loud enough? Oh, thank you. Okay, here are the rules for the second part. The person who gets the most paper jets win on your table. So you want to get them to your table, okay? Ready? You've got 30 seconds. We're throwing our paper jets. Everyone has to throw. And then as a table, you're trying to get as many as you can, okay? Ready? Go. These ones are determined to come. You can get up and move around. We really don't mind. Oh, that's a really good place for us. Maybe we can bring them. Every table got one? Okay, start counting up what you've got. Oh, you've got two on your table there. Okay, fabulous. Give yourself a hand. Okay, count up how many paper jets you've got on the table. I see two over here. You got 11? 7? Anyone got higher than 7? 11? Wow! Thank you for playing. Oh, one's still going. So, if you could think of one word for the first game, what would that word be? Participation. Any other words out there? Fun. What else? What about the second game? What would your word be for the second game? Competition. And that's what we have in our program. We have fun. We have opportunities for recovery. When we're not in the program, everyone's competing and they just want all the jets on their table. And we don't feel good about that. Even the people who now have 11 are probably thinking, I didn't really win, did I? And to be truthful, there was no one in my family in recovery. I didn't find out until after my dad died that he'd actually been in the program for 10 years. But no one, even today, is in the program. So I feel like the second half of the game, unless I'm in the rooms. So for that, I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I really appreciated that. I feel like I'm looser now, I'm not as nervous, and I'm ready to enjoy our speakers. Oh, okay. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to introduce Emma. She is our newest member on the panel. She volunteered this morning. So I think she deserves a huge round of applause for being so brave. Do you need this?
I will, yeah.
There's a hole there if you...
Okay. Let me see. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jasmine's introduced me, my name is Emma, and I am a newcomer. I have been in Al-Anon since May 2018. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Since May 2018, originally in Boston, and then when I moved here, I've been coming. So, as she said, I did volunteer this morning. Well, volunteer is quite loose. Quite loose. A couple of weeks ago I got asked to do it and I said, absolutely not. I've got nothing to talk about. No one wants to listen. I haven't been here that long. I've got nothing to say. And then I stupidly asked this morning whether they'd found someone, and then couldn't really get out of it. So for me, that's my higher power's way of saying you have to do it. So here I am. Obviously I haven't rehearsed this very well. I've written a few notes quickly, but I hope it makes sense and I don't waffle too much. So as they told me, all I had to do was share my story. So here goes. So I am the daughter of an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic for most of his life, probably until about 5 years ago. And I didn't really realise how much it affected me because my mum and dad split when I was 3.5. And I lived with my mum, saw my dad once a week, knew he was an alcoholic, but it was a big, everybody drinks, especially in England, everyone drinks, it was just the thing. He always made it out to be not as bad as it was. He was functioning, he went to work, it was all fine, no one really talked about it. Another British thing is that you sweep everything under the carpet, so it wasn't ever spoken about, it was just the way it was. And as I had a conversation, I think, because I'm also a teacher, had a conversation about children actually last week, and also about how you, as a child of an alcoholic, you just think it's normal. Like, it was normal that we would go to the pub on a Sunday with my dad. It was normal my dad would be driving us around drunk. That was normal to us until we grew up and realised, actually, no, that's not normal. When we went to other people's houses, no, that's not the normal procedure. And also for us it was different because most of the time we spent the time with my mum, who didn't drink. Now, for me, I didn't really realise how bad it was until I lived with my dad when I was 17. And before that, and now I've started to realise that a lot of the way I am is because of how I dealt with it, like people have spoken about today, fight or flight. So just going back to how I got to come to Al-Anon was, I thought I dealt with it, haven't spoken to my dad for 5 years. That was my way of dealing with it. Didn't talk to him, I was fine, it was all done. That's the way I dealt with it. I was great now. Can do, you know, I live in a different country. I lived in America for 7 years. So when I moved from England to America, great. Don't have them all in my life because my dad's an alcoholic, but my mum is also not emotional. So between the two of them, as my dad once said to me, why are you and your sister so independent? Well, how do you think we're supposed to be with you two? We've got a not emotional mum and we have an alcoholic dad. So that's the way we coped with it and that's the way we are now. But going back, sorry, I'm waffling. I thought I dealt with it, all fine, lived in a different country, didn't have to deal with him, told him why I didn't want to talk to him, all fine. Pootling along, I actually got talking to a friend who I found out was an alcoholic. She was telling me about Al-Anon because of her husband was going to Al-Anon. She said, you should go. Sat on it for a while, went back to Boston. I went to visit her in Charlotte where I used to live, went back to Boston, looked it up, that's all I did. I thought, no, it's fine, I don't need it. And then a few months later, which must have been April last year, I was having a conversation with my friend and talking about my dad. And she actually said to me, I've never heard you talk about him like that before. Do you think you should go to that group you were talking about? So I was like, okay, good idea. Went, and this is where I am now. So I went, was really nervous about going. Took me a long time to speak, and I did speak when I was in Boston. And then I actually came here in June for a week before I moved here. And when I was here, I actually looked up groups ready. I knew I wanted to come. So I made sure that when I moved to Bermuda, I would definitely go to groups. And actually, until 2 weeks ago, I didn't speak at all in group. I just listened, which actually was really good for me because, as I said earlier, I'll be fine with the talking bucks. That's what I do for a job. Sometimes it's the listening, but it has really helped me. And at the moment, I don't feel I'm doing much towards my recovery, apart from just going to the groups and just listening. When I first came, I thought, I've got step 1 done. I know I'm powerless to it. I don't speak to him. Absolutely fine. Got that one. Great. But until recently, I've actually realised that being powerless to it and admitting to it is a bigger thing for me, because actually it's not just being powerless over the alcohol, but being powerless of how it's made me. And no, I'm not powerless to my actions, but I am powerless to actually how it's made me feel in the past, and that actually I can't do anything about his drinking, and actually powerless sometimes that this is how it's made me feel. Sorry, that doesn't sound very clear, but in my head, can't think of the right words. And I've been talking a lot because over the last few weeks I've just felt really angry for no reason, and I think that's part of me just admitting that I am powerless to it. Sometimes I'm going to feel angry, and I just have to work through it of how it's made me feel. Why has it made me feel that? And I actually have spoken to someone about being my sponsor, and we're going to start working the steps soon. So I'm really excited about that, because at the moment I feel like I've been here nearly a year but not really done much. But I know I have, but I don't feel like, I still don't really know what the steps are, and I don't really know if I've done much to it. But I know it has really helped me just listening to other people. And then going back to like my childhood, I know I've like I said, fight or flight. I've built up lots of different coping strategies, and lots of people I've heard speak about like control, perfectionism, and seeking affirmation. And normally everyone can tell you like they're one of them, and I know I'm all 3. So I find that really hard. Like I try to control everything. My job doesn't help, because obviously when I'm at work I do control everything. And there's some areas of my life I know I've let go of control, but it's still, for me, I'm working on it all the time. And recently, I know I shared in group this week that recently I've been dating someone, and they've actually been at my house a lot. And to me it's really hard, because that's my house. And I find it really tricky, because I'm like, this is my house and I want to control everything in it. But I actually can see things where I've come from, and actually some things I've let go. But I know this has been said today, like each day, one day at a time. And also like you have to be a bit softer on yourself, that it's like progress. Like I have a big thing, like I snap quite a lot. And I did it this morning. And I beat myself up about it, but today has really helped me, because it's like actually it's one day at a time. Like I can look and say, okay, well I didn't do this and I didn't do that, and I would have done that a long time ago. So it's all about progress and small steps for me. And something I actually read this morning, and it wasn't until I started listening to everyone else that it made me think of it. So I'm going to read it to you. And to me it's a bit weird that it was just this morning I read it, but I'm going to read it, and then this just came to me when I was thinking about it this morning. So it's actually from the Hope for Today book, and it's today's entry. So when I first came to Al-Anon, I struggled daily with never-ending negative emotional responses to life, anger, resentment and self-pity. I felt trapped by these feelings. I couldn't detach from them to get perspective, because I thought they were part of me, embedded in my nature. My 4th step helped me realise that I had many of the same shortcomings as my alcoholic father. I shared my awareness with my sponsor, and she pointed out several pieces of Al-Anon literature, suggesting that emotional responses and shortcomings are learned rather than innate. For the first time, I realised that I may have embraced some of my father's alcoholic attitudes. I could almost feel a slight breeze pass between my character defects and me. Maybe my shortcomings were not as bound to me as I had thought. Perhaps there was hope. I could be free of my self-defeating attitudes. I continued working the steps and finally came to step 7. I humbly asked God to take away my negative outlook. Now, when I feel angry or resentful, I stop and think. I examine the thoughts that led to the feeling. Are they based on reality or on old patterns of reacting? When I'm honest with myself, I begin to see anger, resentment, and self-pity as choices I've made, not emotions someone made me feel. With the help of my higher power, I am learning to give careful consideration to choices that affect my emotional quality of life. Whatever difficulties I have in recovery, I had to remember that I am not an inherently flawed person. Whatever has been learnt can be unlearned. Someone said I wasn't born this way, I learned. When I heard that, I felt more hope than I have ever experienced. When I read that, that really hit home to me, because that's the thing is, I think, like I was saying, like the anger, the self-pity, you have to just remember that it is a choice. And I think that's the biggest thing, and the thing that I'm going to go away and work a lot on, hopefully with my sponsor as well. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you.
Wow, you're in the right place, Emma, and I'm so glad you volunteered today. That was great, thank you. And I'm going to now introduce our longest serving old timer. Pam came into the program in 1968. A lot of you weren't even born then. So I'm just so excited that she agreed to speak, and I think she's going to share a little bit about Al-Anon's history in Bermuda as well. So welcome, Pam.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yep. My name's Pam, a member of Al-Anon. And as Jasmine just mentioned, I'm one of the oldest members in the Bermuda Al-Anon. And I just want to briefly read a bit of history that one of our other members, Daphne T., and I compiled a few years ago, because time moves on and, you know, your memory fades. So here goes. This was 1967, the beginning. Al-Anon was first formed sometime in the late 1950s or early 1960s by a small group of women. This, however, did not last very long. Edith S. was part of that group. It was in the early fall of 1967 that Al-Anon was formed again. The meeting was held at 8:30 on Monday night at Wesley Methodist Church Hall in Hamilton. The starting time of 8:30 was to allow the cruise ship passengers to attend after the dinner hour. Beverly W. was an American serviceman's wife who was stationed at Kingley Air Force Base. And she was instrumental in forming the group. The Alcoholics Anonymous meeting was also held there at the same time. This is literature. Literature was limited. The early publications listed were available prior to 1968. Al-Anon Faces Alcoholism, Living with an Alcoholic, The Dilemma of the Alcoholic Marriage, One Day at a Time in Al-Anon, and the first edition is 1968, which I'm pleased to say I have. We relied greatly on the literature, as some of the dog-eared pages were proof. Members were a close-knit group, embracing each other in our joys and sorrows. It was a special treat to have a visitor from abroad in attendance. Most times they were asked to chair the meeting. They appeared to have such knowledge and serenity, especially if they were in the program longer than a year. Male members were a rarity and proof that they too suffered from someone else's drinking. And I'll just read a brief little blurb here on how I came to be in Al-Anon. I joined Al-Anon in 1967, soon after the first meeting was held at Wesley Methodist Church on Church Street. My husband Reggie was instrumental in my attending Al-Anon. Between Beverly W. and Reggie, I was coerced into going to the meeting. At first, I believed that only the alcoholic needed to attend meetings. You see, I was doing just fine and preferred to be left alone. Beverly continued to show up at my door each Monday night to take me to the meeting. Little by little, one day at a time, I became aware that Al-Anon was truly for me. Through the years, I've had trials and tribulations, as well as sheer joy and accomplishments. I had many futile attempts at detachment, trust, faith, turning it over. Finally, I realized that it was not about being perfect, but about trying and learning from the experiences. The Al-Anon program has been a way of life for me. I have progressed from being the youngest in the group to one of the eldest. My life has changed dramatically, and I shall continue to lean on the program for support. And so that's how it came about for me to be in Al-Anon. I'll just say a few things about prior to Al-Anon. I was born the eldest child to a family of three. I had a younger sister and a brother. And my parents did not drink. I knew nothing about alcohol. But being the eldest, I sort of played the role of caregiver a lot of times. There was a time when my father had had a bad car accident and was not able to work for a whole year. So I took up the slack as a young teenager, and I think I was about 16, had this night job at the movie theater. We didn't talk a lot about things, and my mother was the disciplinarian, and my father usually said very little. Anyway, I left school and got a job and moved to a nearby city. And on a whim, one day, this other friend of mine and I wrote a letter to the Castle Harbor Hotel in Bermuda applying for jobs. Never giving this any thought at all, we just sent the letter off. And casually mentioned to my family, you know, we just applied for a job in Bermuda. And they said, oh yeah? Sure enough, we got a reply quite quickly, and here we are in Bermuda. Actually, my parents, I don't think, were too pleased. My father went to the library to get a book on Bermuda because none of us knew anything about it or even where it was. Anyway, arrived here. Now, Castle Harbor Hotel was where now Tucker's Point is, in case Some of you do not know that. And proceeded to go to work. Started to have a lot of fun. We really did. I had no responsibilities. And, we really had genuinely a lot of fun. And I met this very dashing, handsome young guy who was quite witty, quite funny, very charming. His name was Reggie. Well, as time went on, we decided that perhaps we should get married. And I did think at one point that drinking, sometimes he says he's going to pick me up at 7 o'clock, he shows up at 8. Stuff like that. It used to kind of annoy me, but I just thought, oh well. And then we planned this wedding, which was going to be in my hometown in Canada. And I figured at that stage that once we get married, everything's going to be fine. I'm going to put a stop to all this drinking. That's how it's going to be. And things just progressed as far as the drinking was concerned. And we ended up coming back to live in Bermuda, and that's where our first child was born. And I continued to try and control every situation. Every waking hour was consumed by the alcoholic's whereabouts and how much is he drinking and what time is he getting back home. I tried to be perfect in every way. I kept clean house, did all the laundry, always had a meal ready at 5 o'clock, had the child, cleaned up, and, I did everything right, but still he would not stop. It continued on. And then, as I say here, it was through his determination, more or less. He'd already gone to AA, and he could see where I really need Al-Anon. And it's a strange thing. He's the one that introduced me to Al-Anon, and that's how it came about. But there were times, many times, where sobriety was here, hit or miss, a lot of slips, and I continued with Al-Anon because I really needed it. I had figured out finally that I had no control over the alcoholic and his drinking. I had only myself to think about and try and do better, with a lot of failures along the way. And there was a time when, after a long spell, we had continuous sobriety. And in those early days of continual sobriety in the home, of course, I'd heard that alcoholism is a family disease, and I could see that already. And, I had 2 children by then, and I sometimes the thought crossed my mind, now we're like a big-time 12-step program family. Everything circles around the programs, the meetings, and socializing with people within the fellowship. I was becoming more stable, you might say. And the thought crossed my mind, though, alcoholism is a family disease. I'm wondering about these children of mine. How will they turn out as adults? And that sort of went through my mind, like, what about this alcoholism? And I've had permission to mention this. Sure enough, as time went on, it came to light that one of my daughters was truly an alcoholic. And I thought, damn it, how could this be? This kid was raised around AA and Al-Anon morning, noon, and night. Well, when it came down to the crunch, she was relieved and quite willing to seek help. And I'm very grateful of that. And she said it was through us, the family, being so supportive of her and all of that. And she has 22 years of sobriety. So I'm grateful, that Al-Anon does work. I know I had a lot of ups and downs and a lot of decisions that were made, and I thought at the time they were the right decision, to find out they were not. But, I'm only human, and there's no such thing as perfection. There was a lot of self-searching going on. And that I, too, played a big part in the family discord in the beginning days with that alcoholic drinking. I wouldn't hesitate to tell them off left, right, and center. So since then, I have mellowed a bit, and I'm just happy to say that if it wasn't for Al-Anon, things could have turned out quite different. Actually, my husband would say AA saved his life and Al-Anon saved the marriage. And since this writing, a lot of things have happened in my life. I lost my husband, my sister, and my brother all in 1 year. And that was a pretty heavy load to handle. We go through it, but we don't get over it. I did seek outside help for this, and it was a good idea. And shortly after, within about 6 months after their passing, a voice told me one morning, "You need to paint." And I said, "What? Paint?" And I was just driven by that. I went and bought paint supplies. I signed up for an art class, and I was there. That was on a Thursday, and on a Saturday I was at the class. Now, that had to have been some kind of divine intervention. And it's really been therapeutic for me. I'm still practicing my art, and very critical of my own work. And I've also just recently taken up learning a foreign language. So let's see how that goes. Anyway, I'm happy to see everyone here today together. And I just want to, express that do not give up. There is hope. And stick close to the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've got 1 minute left. Courage to Change, page 326. Sometimes I think that because I've been in Al-Anon for a long time, I shouldn't have any more problems. When difficulties do arise, I feel something is wrong with me or with the program. Actually, in some ways, I have more problems than ever. When I came to Al-Anon, I had only one problem. I didn't know how to fix the alcoholic. My life was completely in shambles, but I swore that I was fine. Today I know that I can't fix anyone but myself, and I challenge myself daily to seek a richer, more meaningful life. I'm taking risks, facing fears, making changes, speaking up, making myself available to life. I'm bound to run into snags here and there. Sometimes life doesn't follow my blueprint. I get overwhelmed and want to crawl under the covers and hide. At such a time, it helps to remember that Al-Anon doesn't take away problems, but it does give me the courage and insight to turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. Today's reminder. In handling my difficulties, what's important isn't how much time I have in Al-Anon, but how willing I am to implement the tools of recovery. While Al-Anon doesn't grant immunity from problems, it does offer a healthy way to deal with them. Troubles are often the tools by which God fashions us for better things. And this is by H.W. Beecher.
Thank you so much, Pam, for that. So many happy memories with you and Reggie over the years, and you brought them all back. Thank you. Our last speaker is Virginia, and we're looking forward to hearing from you, Virginia.
Thank you, Jasmine. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Virginia, and I am an adult child of an alcoholic and a grateful member of the Al-Anon family groups.
Hi, Virginia.
When I was asked to speak at this convention, I hesitated because I've never done that before, so I thought I'd better write it down, organize my thoughts. And I thought it would be a bit hypocritical of me to speak because of the theme. I thought, well, I don't always feel so happy, joyous, and free. But I also thought I can't think of any reason why I shouldn't, because I know this is a program of progress and nobody's perfect, including myself. And maybe I can learn from this because I know that service encourages growth. So I said yes. And I'm glad I did. And I haven't been to a convention in a long time, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm learning from other people as well this weekend. So I'll begin by sharing my journey with you in the program. When I was a teenager, the first Alateen group was formed probably about 4 or 5 years after Al-Anon began, with the help of Jerry S., some of you may remember. And to my surprise, as of this weekend, I attended my first Alateen meeting, and there were people there that I knew. And in looking back, I thought, some of my best friends through school came from alcoholic households. I guess we bond because we have certain things in common. And, anyway, we were there to learn all about alcoholism as a disease and how it affected the family. And most important of all, we didn't cause it, we can't control it, and we couldn't cure it, which is part of the reason I thought we were all there. So that was kind of hard to understand because it wasn't like other diseases I was familiar with as a teenager. You went to a doctor, you got treated, and you got better. This was kind of up to every individual to do something about, so that was different. So we learned how, the program encouraged us to learn to focus on ourselves so that, we could gain more hope in living a life that could be possibly free of all the worries and issues that we knew from growing up in an alcoholic household. My mother did eventually go to Al-Anon, and over the years things did improve because our behaviors changed. We weren't trying to make the alcoholic change. So one big thing I learned, and I still struggle with today, is how I can prevent what I call the what ifs. What if this is going to happen? So I better do plan A, B, C, and D and have everything ready because things didn't always go as they seem to in other people's houses, as Emma mentioned. You're a bit afraid to invite friends over after school because you never knew what you were going to find, especially if there was a mostly empty bottle of Black Seal rum in the fridge. For some reason, my dad always left that much. I guess for him it was like, I didn't drink the whole bottle. So how could I be an alcoholic? I don't know. But you knew it was like, okay, this is going to be a tough evening. Anyway, I also realized in reflecting on preparing for this that, some of that embarrassment was not concern for my father. It was, what about me? What are people going to think about me? Because, we should be doing something about this. And, it was still hard to accept that you can't. It's up to them when they're ready, just as it is for us for when we're ready to come to Al-Anon. So anyway, Alateen was the beginning of showing me some tools to plan and run my own life and not let fear and embarrassment run my life. So as an adult, when I came back from university, I joined Al-Anon, where I learned more about the steps and traditions and looked at other ways I can apply them in my life, in my working life, friendships, and so on. And I still have a long way to go in this respect. And as a result of preparing for this convention, I feel a growing readiness to do more work that I've been avoiding and maybe not playing lip service to go into meetings. And we've heard that yesterday for those of us that were here. In meetings, I listened to Al-Anon members share, and I saw how they had freed themselves from trying to control the alcoholic. They made plans, they carried them out, and they sounded like they were having fun, whether the alcoholic was drinking or not, or whether the alcoholic was in a program or not. And I have permission to say this from someone who inspires me greatly, because this member has certain occasions where she would like a certain person in her life who's an alcoholic to come and join. But that doesn't always work out, as I'll share about my own family. So she just has her backup plan. She invites people. She invites friends, family, members of Al-Anon. And she celebrates the way she wants to, whether that person is there or not. And, Al-Anon teaches you, just get on with your life. And maybe the partner or person or family member will notice, you're having fun. What's going on? You're not at home feeling sorry for yourself, moping, and, well, I can't do anything without. And, sometimes that leads to change in the other person. But in the meantime, we're here so we can all enjoy being happy, joyous, and free. And we have to do the things we love, with or without certain people. So it's a powerful reminder that I can still make plans and enjoy life, with or without the alcoholic there. Of course, I would have loved to have had my father participate in family celebrations, but it wasn't always in his plans. Now I realize he probably wanted to do these things, but he grew up with an alcoholic father, and we weren't allowed to ask too many questions about that. It's not something he enjoyed talking about. So his disease and the family disease hindered his participation in family events. So because of the nature of alcoholism as a family disease, people who love the alcoholic tend to think they know what's best for him or her, and it can certainly bring out the need to be in control, and that's certainly a part of who I am. So it is through the grace of this program and the caring members that I'm reminded to reflect and go back to step one. Over and over, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol or whatever else is going on in our life, that our lives had become unmanageable. And it was pretty easy to see, it's pretty unmanageable, but it's hard to see we're powerless over certain things. So even though my father stopped drinking a few years before he died, some of the behaviors I learned growing up during the active years affected who I am in my relationships with people at work. And I can easily get into the control mode if I see dysfunction, like, okay, I know what to do and I can do it, and everybody else should do it too, and if you don't, I'm going to be tired, resentful that you didn't help, and that's not healthy behavior. So I was pretty good so far anyway at not becoming an alcoholic, but I was becoming a control freak. And that doesn't lead to being happy, joyous, and free. So one other thing I want to share about barriers to being happy. I did not look forward to Christmas because some other relatives in our family had a problem with drinking, and as we know what happens in Bermuda almost any day, but especially around family holidays, somebody got drunk, somebody said something stupid, and it wasn't a happy evening. So I learned to oh no, the Christmas lights are going up around town, and this is the beginning, and not much joy. And I would go out of my way to avoid coming into town. In those days, it was, I think, mostly Front Street, so you can avoid it to get to certain places after dark. And, I just didn't want to see the Christmas lights because it just triggered a lot of unhappy things. And one of them was an aunt who used to offer to drive my sibling and I around to see the Christmas lights. And she would say some pretty crazy, frightening things. So when I got older, no, I don't want to do this, So there are a few reasons, and I came to realize that in another therapy group, which included people like myself or even some alcoholics, and I came to the realization it was that fear of, being out of control, being a child and somebody who you didn't trust doing something that you didn't want to do. And then I realized I can enjoy Christmas, I can enjoy the lights, and I used to drive an elderly friend of my mom's around to see the lights because her husband worked for the corporation of Hamilton and put them up, and she missed him. And I'd say, well, I'll drive you around. And I began to enjoy it and look forward to it, and I put lights up on a tree outside the house. So that's just a small thing, but the Christmas lights remind me of every year, in a big way, a little step I made in trying to get some joy and freedom from that fear. So I find Al-Anon is my toolbox for life. It's like a booster shot going to meetings. New members in the program give us an opportunity to reflect on where we've come, even though we don't think, well, I'm not where I want to be. But thank goodness for them, because it helps us share and reflect all the time, and that's what this program does. The program teaches me I deserve to be happy, and I deserve some joy, and I deserve to be free from my barriers that many times, I put in front of myself. That this program can teach me to grow to love myself enough to stop sabotaging myself, practice more self-love, look forward to the future. If one thing doesn't work, I can take other directions. I don't have to be stuck in fear. I may not always be happy, joyous, and free, but I do have a program to bring my realities into focus. When I have an open mind, the steps are there, sponsorship is there, the tools are there, so I can overcome things that challenge me. And I think we all have something that other people who don't have this program have. And I used to wonder, why are people so grateful that they're, married to an alcoholic or whatever. But we have tools to help us where other people don't. And when we're around people who don't seem to be coping, we're like, there is another way. So by sharing today, I hope that my story has helped at least one person in this room. Maybe, as mentioned, some of you may be family or friends of and here for your first time. So I invite you to try the program and become part of Amazing Fellowship. And I'd like to thank Jasmine for asking me to do this. And I'd also like to thank my sponsor for helping me to reflect on some of the things I've shared today. And I'm still learning and hope to continue to learn, especially this weekend. So it's been a pleasure to share my story with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody, for a wonderful recovery. I'd just like to invite Anne to do our closing, and then we'll just have a short break.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Anne, a grateful member of Al-Anon.
Hi, Anne.
In closing, I'd like to say that the opinions expressed here were strictly those of the person who gave them. Take what you liked and leave the rest. The things you heard were spoken in confidence and should be treated as confidential. Keep them within the walls of this room and the confines of your mind. A few special words to those of you who haven't been with us long. Whatever your problems, there are those among you who have had them too. If you try to keep an open mind, you'll find help. You'll come to realize that there's no situation too difficult to be better and no unhappiness too great to be lessened. We aren't perfect. The welcome we give you may not show the warmth we have in our hearts for you. After a while, you'll discover that though you may not like us all, you love us in a very special way, the same way we already love you. Talk to each other, reason things out with someone else, but let there be no gossip or criticism of one another. Instead, let the understanding, love, and peace of the program grow in you one day at a time. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Anne. I know we've kind of gone over our time a little bit, so can we just have a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to invite our overseas speaker, Anon speaker from Diane from Nashville, to come up and speak. And thank you to the panel, and thank you all for being here.